Mia's hand froze on the door handle the moment she realized her mistake. Steam rolled out into the hallway, warm and thick, and through it stood a man she had never seen before, water running down his shoulders, completely unaware that the door had opened. For one heartbeat, everything stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Then instinct took over, and she yanked the door shut so fast the frame rattled. She stood frozen in the narrow hallway, her back pressed against the wall, her heart slamming against her ribs like it wanted to escape her chest. Her face burned hot with embarrassment. She could hear her own pulse in her ears. Somewhere behind that door, a stranger was probably standing in shock too, wondering who had just seen him. Mia pressed her palms to her cheeks, trying to cool the heat rushing to her face. This was not how she imagined her evening going. She had come to this apartment for one reason only. Her closest friend, Grace, had begged her to come to a small gathering, insisting it would be good for her to get out of her shell for once. Mia was not a person who enjoyed parties. She preferred quiet corners, familiar faces, and predictable evenings. But Grace had a way of convincing her, and so here she was, standing in an unfamiliar hallway, replaying the worst 10 seconds of her week. She had only wanted to find the bathroom. The apartment was larger than she expected, with several doors lining the hallway, none of them labeled, and the music from the living room made it hard to concentrate. She picked the door that seemed most logical, gave a light knock that nobody heard over the noise, and pushed it open when there was no answer. That decision would haunt her for the rest of the night. Now, frozen in the hallway, she tried to decide what to do. Should she wait for him to come out and apologize? Should she pretend it never happened and vanish into the crowd of people she barely knew? Every option felt worse than the last. Her hands were still trembling slightly, and she pressed them flat against her jeans to stop the shaking. From behind the door, she heard the water shut off. A few seconds later, footsteps. Panic surged through her, and she darted down the hallway just in time, slipping around the corner into the living room, where the noise of laughter and clinking glasses swallowed her sudden entrance. Grace spotted her immediately and waved her over, unaware that anything had happened. "There you are. I thought you got lost," she said, laughing, handing Mia a glass of juice. Mia forced a smile, though her mind was still spinning. "I did get a little lost, actually," she admitted, her voice unsteady. Grace didn't notice the tremor in her tone, too busy introducing her to a group of friends gathered near the window. Mia nodded along to names she wouldn't remember later, her attention drifting toward the hallway every few seconds, dreading and anticipating the moment the stranger would appear. She told herself it didn't matter. He probably wouldn't even recognize her. People saw hundreds of faces at parties like this, and surely this would just become a forgettable, mortifying accident that neither of them would mention again. That thought gave her the smallest bit of comfort, enough to help her breathe normally again. But comfort didn't last long. A few minutes later, the noise in the room shifted slightly, that subtle change that happens when someone new enters a space. Mia turned instinctively, and her stomach dropped. There he was. Dressed now, hair still damp, wearing a simple gray shirt that fit like he hadn't put much thought into it. He walked into the room with an easy confidence that made him impossible to ignore. He wasn't loud or flashy, but there was something steady about the way he carried himself, calm and unbothered, like nothing in the world could catch him off guard. Mia's stomach twisted painfully. This was him, the same man from the shower. She recognized the shape of his shoulders immediately, the same dark hair, though now it looked far more composed than the wet mess she had glimpsed moments earlier. She looked away quickly, hoping to disappear into the crowd, but it was too late. Grace, completely oblivious to the tension building in Mia's chest, called out cheerfully, "Daniel, come meet my friend Mia." Mia's stomach dropped even further. Of course he was Grace's older brother, the one she had heard stories about but never actually met. Grace had mentioned him a few times before, saying he traveled often for work and rarely came home. But apparently, this weekend was one of those rare occasions. Daniel turned toward them, and for a brief second, his eyes met Mia's. She braced herself for the awkward reaction she expected, the raised eyebrows, the surprised expression, the moment where he would realize exactly who she was. Instead, his lips curved into an amused smile. "So we meet again," he said lightly, his tone teasing rather than accusing. Mia's face turned a deep shade of red. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Grace looked between them, confused. Wait, you two already met? Daniel chuckled softly, clearly enjoying Mia's obvious embarrassment. You could say that, he said, glancing at Mia with a playful glint in his eyes. She walked in on me in the shower. Grace's mouth dropped open before she burst into laughter, covering her face with her hand. Oh my gosh, Mia, why didn't you tell me? Mia wanted to disappear into the floor. I didn't know it was your brother. I thought it was the bathroom, she said quickly, her voice rising with embarrassment. Daniel raised both hands in mock surrender. Relax, it's fine, no harm done. Though I have to admit, it's not every day someone walks in on me like that. His tone was light, almost amused, clearly trying to ease her embarrassment rather than deepen it. Mia managed a nervous laugh, though her cheeks were still burning. I am so sorry. I really am. I should have knocked louder or something. It's okay, Daniel said, his voice softening slightly. Honestly, it's kind of funny now that I think about it. Grace, still laughing, shook her head. Only you, Mia. Only you could walk into the one room you shouldn't have. Mia groaned, covering her face with her hands. Please, can we talk about literally anything else? Daniel smiled again, clearly enjoying himself far more than she was comfortable with. Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. Well, except for the fact that my sister now knows everything. Grace grinned. Oh, I am never letting either of you live this down. Despite her embarrassment, Mia found herself smiling faintly at the way Daniel handled the situation. He could have made her feel worse, could have teased her endlessly in front of everyone, but instead, he seemed to be trying to make her feel at ease, turning what could have been a humiliating memory into something almost lighthearted. As the evening went on, Mia tried to focus on the party, on the friends around her, on anything except the mortifying moment from earlier, but her eyes kept drifting toward Daniel every so often, watching the way he moved through the room, easy and relaxed, chatting comfortably with everyone he approached. She told herself it meant nothing. It was simply curiosity, nothing more. After all, meeting someone under such an unusual circumstance left an impression, whether she wanted it to or not. Still, as she sipped her drink and tried to blend into the background, she couldn't shake the growing feeling that this accidental meeting was only the beginning of something far more complicated and far more interesting than she had expected. The night was young, the party still buzzing with laughter and music, but for Mia, everything had already changed the moment she opened that wrong door, and somewhere deep down, despite the embarrassment still burning in her chest, she couldn't help but feel a small spark of curiosity about the man who had just turned her worst moment into something oddly memorable. Little did she know, this would not be the last surprising moment of the night. The party continued around her, laughter rising and falling like waves, but Mia felt strangely disconnected from it all, as though she were watching the evening unfold from somewhere just outside herself. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, the steam, the surprised look on Daniel's face, the sound of the door slamming shut. It felt like a scene from someone else's life, not her own quiet, careful existence. Grace pulled her toward the kitchen a while later, insisting she needed help refilling snacks, though Mia suspected it was really just an excuse to talk privately. Okay, spill everything, Grace said the moment they were out of earshot, grinning from ear to ear. How exactly did you end up walking in on my brother? Mia groaned, covering her face with both hands. It was an accident, Grace. I swear. I was looking for the bathroom, and there were like 5 doors in that hallway, and none of them were labeled, and the music was so loud I couldn't hear anything, and I just picked one and opened it. Grace laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter for support. Only you would manage something like this. Only you. It's not funny, Mia said, though the corner of her mouth twitched despite herself. I have never been more embarrassed in my entire life. Oh, come on, it's a little funny, Grace teased, nudging her with an elbow. Besides, Daniel didn't seem upset at all. If anything, he looked amused. Mia bit her lip, thinking back to the way he had reacted, the easy smile, the teasing tone, the complete absence of anger or awkwardness on his part. It confused her more than she wanted to admit. She had expected him to be irritated, maybe even annoyed at the intrusion, But instead, he had turned the entire situation into a joke, one that somehow made her feel less humiliated rather than more. "He's not usually around much," Grace continued, grabbing a bowl of chips from the cabinet. "He travels constantly for work. I think the last time he was actually home for more than a weekend was almost a year ago." "What does he do?" Mia asked, before she could stop herself, immediately regretting the question when Grace's eyebrows lifted knowingly. "Oh, interested, are we?" Grace teased, drawing the words out slowly. "No," Mia said quickly, far too quickly. "I'm just making conversation." Grace laughed again, clearly not convinced, but she let it go, explaining that Daniel worked in some kind of engineering consulting role that required him to travel between cities often, sometimes even leaving the country for weeks at a time. It was part of the reason Grace hardly saw him, despite living in the same city for most of the year. They carried the snacks back out to the living room, and Mia tried to focus on the conversations happening around her, but her attention kept drifting toward the far side of the room, where Daniel stood chatting easily with a small group near the window. He had a way of listening that seemed genuine, nodding along, asking questions, laughing at the right moments without forcing it. It was a small thing to notice, but she noticed it anyway. At one point, their eyes met across the room, and instead of looking away in embarrassment like she expected herself to, Mia found herself offering a small, awkward wave. Daniel's lips curved into a smile, and he lifted his cup slightly in response, a silent acknowledgement that somehow made her stomach flutter in an unfamiliar way. She quickly looked away, pretending to be deeply interested in the drink in her hand, though her heart was beating a little faster than it should have been. As the night went on, the group began playing a card game someone had brought, gathering around the coffee table, with mismatched cushions and chairs pulled from every corner of the apartment. Mia usually avoided these kinds of games, preferring to watch from the sidelines rather than participate, but Grace insisted she join, practically pulling her down onto the couch. To her surprise, Daniel ended up sitting almost directly across from her, close enough that their knees nearly touched whenever someone shifted for more space. She tried not to think about it too much, focusing instead on the rules of the game being explained by one of Grace's other friends, though her mind kept wandering back to the earlier incident every few minutes. The game itself was simple, something involving matching cards and quick reflexes, but the atmosphere around the table was lively, filled with laughter and playful arguments over who had cheated and who hadn't. Mia found herself relaxing slightly, the tension from earlier slowly easing as she got caught up in the fun. At one point, she made a mistake that cost her the round, and the group erupted into teasing laughter. Daniel, sitting across from her, leaned forward slightly, a playful glint in his eyes. "You know," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the noise, "for someone who barges into private rooms without warning, you're surprisingly bad at cards." Mia's mouth fell open in mock offense, though she couldn't hide the smile tugging at her lips. "I did not barge in. I made an honest mistake." "An honest mistake that left quite an impression," Daniel replied, his tone teasing but not unkind. "Are you ever going to let that go?" Mia asked, feeling her cheeks warm again, though this time it wasn't purely from embarrassment. "Maybe eventually," he said, leaning back with a satisfied grin. "But where's the fun in that?" Despite herself, Mia laughed, a genuine, easy laugh that surprised even her. It was strange how quickly the tension between them had shifted from mortifying to something almost comfortable, like they had known each other far longer than a single evening. As the game continued, their conversation flowed more naturally. Small comments passed back and forth between rounds, questions about each other's lives sprinkled in between jokes about the game. Mia learned that Daniel had grown up in the same neighborhood as Grace, though he had moved away for work several years earlier, only returning occasionally for holidays or special occasions. "So what do you do?" Daniel asked at one point, genuinely curious, his attention fully focused on her, despite the noise and activity around them. "I work at a small design studio downtown," Mia said, feeling a little self-conscious under his attentive gaze. "Nothing as exciting as traveling the world for work, though." "Design sounds interesting," Daniel said, tilting his head slightly. "What kind of design?" "Mostly graphic design for small businesses," she explained. "Logos, branding, that kind of thing. It's quiet work, but I enjoy it." Quiet work suits quiet people, Daniel said with a small smile, though there was no judgment in his tone, only observation. Mia raised an eyebrow. Are you calling me quiet? I'm saying you seem like someone who prefers watching from the sidelines rather than jumping into the middle of things, he said, studying her with a thoughtful expression. Though tonight seems to be breaking that pattern a little. She wasn't sure how to respond to that, mostly because he wasn't wrong. She had always been the type to observe rather than participate, comfortable in the background rather than the center of attention. Yet here she was, laughing and talking with a stranger she had met under the most humiliating circumstances imaginable, feeling more at ease than she had in a long time. As the game wound down and people began drifting into smaller conversations around the apartment, Daniel and Mia found themselves still sitting near each other, the conversation continuing even as others moved away. Grace shot Mia a knowing look from across the room, one that made Mia roll her eyes in response, though she couldn't deny the small flutter of excitement building in her chest. They talked for what felt like hours, though it had only been about 30 minutes. Daniel spoke about his work, describing the different cities he had visited, the challenges of constant travel, and the strange comfort he found in unfamiliar places. Mia found herself genuinely interested, asking questions, imagining the places he described, places she had never been but suddenly wished she could see. In turn, she shared small details about her life, her love for quiet mornings, her tendency to overthink every social interaction, her habit of arriving early to places just to avoid the awkwardness of walking into a room full of people already settled. Daniel listened closely, nodding along, occasionally asking follow-up questions that showed he was genuinely paying attention, rather than simply waiting for his turn to speak. At one point, someone turned up the music, and a few people began dancing near the center of the room, pulling others into the fun. Grace tried to drag Mia along, but she shook her head, laughing, insisting she preferred watching over participating. Daniel, however, remained seated beside her, seemingly content to stay out of the dancing as well. Not a fan of dancing either? Mia asked, glancing at him curiously. I can dance, he said with mock seriousness. I just choose not to embarrass myself in front of new acquaintances. Mia laughed. That's convenient. Extremely, he agreed, his eyes crinkling with amusement. As the night stretched on, their conversation continued to weave between light teasing and genuine curiosity, each question revealing another small piece of who they were. Mia found herself surprised by how easy it felt to talk to him, how naturally the conversation flowed despite the awkward beginning to their evening. She had come to this party expecting to feel out of place, expecting to spend most of the night quietly standing beside Grace, waiting for a reasonable moment to leave. Instead, she found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, caught in an easy, comfortable conversation with someone she had met in the most mortifying way possible. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice reminded her that this was still incredibly new, that she barely knew this man beyond a single evening of conversation. Yet despite that voice, she couldn't shake the growing sense that something about tonight felt different, more meaningful, than she had expected when she first arrived. As the evening began winding down, guests slowly gathering their things and saying their goodbyes, Mia realized with a small pang of disappointment that the night was coming to an end. She wasn't ready for the conversation to stop, wasn't ready to return to her quiet apartment and the predictable routine she usually found so comforting. Daniel seemed to notice her hesitation as she gathered her jacket, glancing toward the door with visible reluctance. Heading out? He asked, his tone casual, though there was something else beneath it, something that made her wonder if he felt the same reluctance she did. I probably should, she said, glancing at the clock on the wall. It's getting late, and I have an early morning tomorrow. Daniel nodded, standing as well. Let me walk you to your car, he offered, the words simple, but carrying a weight that made her stomach flutter again. Mia hesitated for only a moment before nodding, a small smile forming despite the nervous energy building inside her. Sure, she said, that would be nice. As they said their goodbyes to Grace and the remaining guests, Mia couldn't help but feel a small thrill of anticipation building inside her, wondering what the walk to her car might bring, wondering if this strange, unexpected evening was truly coming to an end, or if it was only just beginning. The night air was cool against Mia's skin as she stepped outside, a welcome contrast to the warmth of the crowded apartment. Streetlights lined the quiet road, casting a soft golden glow over the parked cars, and the distant hum of the party faded behind them as they walked side by side toward her car. Neither of them spoke for the first few steps, the silence comfortable rather than awkward, filled only with the sound of their footsteps on the pavement and the faint rustle of leaves overhead. "So," Daniel finally said, breaking the silence with a small smile, "was tonight everything you expected when you agreed to come to this party?" Mia laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not even close. I expected to spend the evening quietly avoiding conversations, not accidentally walking in on someone in the shower, and then somehow becoming friends with them." "Friends," Daniel repeated, his tone playful. "Is that what we are now?" "I don't know," Mia said, glancing sideways at him, a teasing edge to her voice. "You tell me. Is this how you make all your friends? Through accidental encounters in bathrooms?" Daniel laughed, the sound warm and genuine in the quiet night. "Only the memorable ones." They continued walking, the conversation flowing easily between them, filled with small observations about the party, playful jokes, and occasional pauses where neither of them felt the need to fill the silence with unnecessary words. "Can I ask you something?" Mia said after a moment, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Of course," Daniel replied, glancing at her with genuine interest. "Why weren't you upset earlier? When I walked in on you, I mean. Most people would have been furious, or at least incredibly uncomfortable. You just laughed it off." Daniel considered the question for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, I don't know. I think I was more surprised than anything else. And then when I saw how embarrassed you were, it seemed unnecessary to make it worse by getting upset. Accidents happen. It's not like you meant to walk in on me." "Still," Mia said, "most people wouldn't have handled it as gracefully as you did. Maybe I just didn't see the point in ruining what could have been a funny story instead," Daniel said with a small shrug. "Besides, it gave us something to talk about tonight, didn't it?" Mia smiled, unable to argue with that logic. "I suppose it did." They reached her car eventually, though neither of them seemed eager to end the conversation. Mia leaned against the driver's side door, her keys held loosely in her hand, while Daniel stood a comfortable distance away, his hands tucked into his pockets. "So," he said, glancing at her with a curious expression, "tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with tonight's embarrassing incident." Mia laughed, thinking for a moment before answering. "I collect old postcards, from places I've never been. I like imagining what it would be like to visit them someday." Daniel's eyebrows rose with genuine interest. "That's oddly specific. Where did that start?" "My grandmother used to send me postcards whenever she traveled," Mia explained, a soft smile forming as she remembered. "After she passed, I started collecting them from flea markets and antique shops, just as a way to feel connected to that memory, I guess." "That's actually really sweet," Daniel said, his tone gentle. "Do you have a favorite?" "One from a small coastal town in Portugal," Mia said without hesitation. "I don't even know if the town still looks the same, but there's something about the picture that always makes me want to visit someday." "Maybe you will," Daniel said simply, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Mia felt a small flutter in her chest at his words, though she quickly brushed it aside, unwilling to read too much into a simple comment. "Maybe," she agreed softly. They continued talking for several more minutes, the conversation shifting from postcards to childhood memories, from Daniel's frequent travels to Mia's quiet love for staying in one place. Despite the differences in their lifestyles, there was an ease between them that neither of them fully understood, yet neither seemed eager to question it. "I should probably let you go," Daniel said eventually, glancing at the time on his phone. "It's getting late, and you did mention an early morning." "Right," Mia said, feeling an unexpected pang of disappointment at the reminder. "I should probably head home." Daniel nodded, though he made no immediate move to walk away. Instead, he studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Can I ask you something else before you go?" "Sure," Mia said, curiosity piqued. "Would it be all right if I got your number? I'd like to continue this conversation sometime, if you're open to it." Mia's heart skipped slightly at the request, surprise and excitement mixing together in a way that left her momentarily speechless. She hadn't expected the evening to end this way, Hadn't expected someone like Daniel to show genuine interest in continuing whatever this strange connection between them was. "I'd like that," she said finally, a small smile forming as she pulled out her phone. They exchanged numbers quickly, the simple exchange carrying a weight that neither of them acknowledged out loud. As Mia typed her number into his phone, she couldn't help but wonder where this unexpected evening might lead, whether this strange, mortifying encounter would fade into nothing more than an amusing memory, or whether it might grow into something far more meaningful. "Good night, Mia," Daniel said as she finally opened her car door, his voice soft in the quiet night. "Good night, Daniel," she replied, offering a small smile before sliding into the driver's seat. As she drove home through the quiet streets, her mind replayed every moment of the evening, from the horrifying encounter in the hallway to the easy, comfortable conversation that followed. She still couldn't quite believe how the night had unfolded, how a single embarrassing mistake had led to laughter, connection, and the exchange of phone numbers with someone she barely knew, yet somehow felt drawn to. By the time she arrived home, her apartment felt quieter than usual, the familiar silence no longer as comforting as it once was. She changed into her pajamas, brushed her teeth, and climbed into bed, her mind still buzzing with thoughts of the evening. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it curiously, her heart skipping when she saw Daniel's name on the screen. The message was simple, just a few words, yet it made her smile more than she expected. "Made it home safe. Thanks for the memorable evening. Talk soon." Mia typed back a quick reply, her fingers hovering over the screen for a moment before sending it. "Talk soon," she confirmed, setting her phone aside with a small, contented sigh. As she finally drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had been the beginning of something entirely unexpected, something that had started with the worst possible mistake, yet somehow blossomed into the most memorable encounter she'd had in a long time. The following days passed slowly for Mia, filled with the usual routine of work and quiet evenings at home, yet everything felt slightly different now, colored by the anticipation of messages from Daniel that arrived at unpredictable but welcome moments throughout the day. Their conversations continued over text, small exchanges about their days, questions about favorite books and films, playful teasing about the now infamous shower incident that neither of them seemed willing to let go of entirely. Mia found herself smiling at her phone more often than usual, a small, private happiness that she hadn't experienced in quite some time. Grace noticed the change almost immediately, teasing her relentlessly whenever they spoke, insisting that she had never seen Mia this distracted over anyone before. Mia tried to downplay it, insisting it was nothing serious, just casual conversation between new acquaintances, but even she couldn't fully convince herself of that explanation. As the days passed, she found herself looking forward to Daniel's messages more than she wanted to admit, each notification bringing a small flutter of excitement that she hadn't felt in a long time. Despite the embarrassing circumstances that had brought them together, something about their connection felt genuine, unforced, entirely unlike anything she had experienced before. She wondered, quietly, where this unexpected friendship might lead, whether it would fade into nothing more than a pleasant memory, or whether it might grow into something far more significant than either of them had anticipated that first, mortifying night. A week after the party, Daniel suggested they meet for coffee, a simple invitation that sent a wave of nervous excitement through Mia the moment she read the message. She agreed almost immediately, then spent the next several minutes second-guessing her own eagerness, wondering if she seemed too available, too eager for someone she barely knew. Grace, of course, had an opinion on the matter the moment Mia mentioned it during their weekly phone call. "You're overthinking this," Grace said, her voice carrying the familiar exasperation she often used whenever Mia spiraled into unnecessary worry. "He asked you to coffee. That's not a marriage proposal. Just go and enjoy yourself." I know, Mia said, twisting the hem of her shirt nervously. "It's just been a while since I've done anything like this, and I don't want to mess it up." "You're not going to mess anything up," Grace reassured her. "Besides, my brother already saw you at your most awkward moment. Things can only go up from here." Mia laughed, despite herself, grateful for Grace's easy reassurance. "Thanks, I think." The day of their coffee meeting arrived faster than Mia expected. and she found herself standing in front of her closet far longer than necessary, trying on and discarding several outfits before settling on something simple yet comfortable. A soft blue sweater and jeans that felt like her, without trying too hard to impress. The coffee shop Daniel suggested was a quiet, cozy place tucked into a corner near downtown, the kind of spot with warm lighting, mismatched furniture, and the comforting smell of fresh pastries filling the air. Mia arrived a few minutes early, a habit she couldn't seem to break, and found a small table near the window, her nervous energy building with every passing minute. Daniel arrived shortly after, spotting her immediately, and offering a warm smile as he made his way over. "Have you been waiting long?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Not too long," Mia said, returning his smile despite the nervous flutter still present in her chest. "I'm early to everything. It's a bit of a habit." "I noticed that about you already," Daniel said with a teasing grin. "You mentioned it during the party, too." "Guilty as charged," Mia admitted, relaxing slightly at the familiar teasing tone. They ordered their drinks, the conversation flowing easily as it had during the party, filled with playful jokes and genuine curiosity about each other's lives. Daniel asked about her work at the design studio, genuinely interested in the projects she had been working on, while Mia asked about his recent travels, imagining the different cities and cultures he described. "So how long are you actually staying in town this time?" Mia asked at one point, curiosity mixing with a small hope she tried not to acknowledge too openly. "A few more weeks at least," Daniel said. "I managed to negotiate some time off before my next assignment. Figured it was about time I spent more than a weekend with my family." "That sounds nice," Mia said, unable to hide the small smile forming at the thought of seeing him more regularly during those weeks. "It is," Daniel agreed, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary, a comfortable silence settling between them that neither seemed eager to break. As their coffee meeting continued, the conversation grew deeper, moving beyond simple small talk into more personal territory. Daniel shared stories about his childhood, growing up alongside Grace, the constant sibling rivalry that had slowly matured into genuine friendship over the years. Mia found herself laughing at his stories, easily picturing a younger version of Grace getting into mischief with her older brother. In turn, Mia opened up about her own past, her tendency toward shyness that had followed her since childhood, the quiet comfort she found in solitary hobbies rather than large social gatherings. She explained how public speaking had always terrified her, how she often rehearsed simple conversations in her head before even attending gatherings like Grace's party. "That's actually really brave then," Daniel said thoughtfully, after she finished explaining her nervousness about attending the party in the first place. "What do you mean?" Mia asked, confused by his observation. "You knew you'd be uncomfortable, surrounded by unfamiliar people, yet you still went," Daniel explained. "That takes more courage than people realize, pushing through something that makes you genuinely uncomfortable." Mia considered his words for a moment, surprised by the perspective. She had always viewed her attendance at social events as forced obligation rather than bravery, yet hearing Daniel frame it that way made her see the situation slightly differently. "I never really thought about it like that," she admitted softly. "Most people don't," Daniel said, offering a small, understanding smile. "But it's true nonetheless." Their conversation continued for hours, longer than either of them had anticipated, the coffee shop slowly emptying around them as the afternoon stretched into evening. Neither of them seemed to notice the passing time, too absorbed in the easy flow of conversation between them. Eventually, as the shop began preparing to close, they reluctantly gathered their things, walking out together into the cool evening air. "I had a really nice time today," Mia said as they walked toward their cars, parked near each other in the small lot beside the coffee shop. "Me too," Daniel agreed, glancing at her with a warm expression. "I'd like to do this again, if you're interested." "I'd like that," Mia said without hesitation, surprising herself with her own confidence. Daniel smiled, clearly pleased with her response. "How about dinner this weekend? Somewhere a little more adventurous than coffee?" Mia laughed softly. "Adventurous how, exactly?" "I know this small restaurant downtown that serves food from all over the world," Daniel explained. "Thought it might be fun to try something new together." "That sounds perfect," Mia said, genuine excitement building in her chest at the thought of another evening spent with him. They exchanged a few more words before finally parting ways, promising to confirm details for their upcoming dinner through text messages over the following days. As Mia drove home, her mind replayed every detail of their conversation, every laugh, every moment of genuine connection that had passed between them throughout the afternoon. The following days passed in a similar rhythm to before, filled with frequent messages and growing anticipation for their upcoming dinner. Mia found herself smiling more often, her usual quiet routine now colored by small bursts of excitement whenever Daniel's name appeared on her phone screen. Grace, of course, continued teasing her relentlessly about the growing relationship, insisting she had never seen her friend this happy in recent memory. Mia tried to downplay her excitement, though even she couldn't deny the genuine happiness building within her as the days passed. When the weekend finally arrived, Mia found herself standing in front of her closet once again, this time selecting a simple yet elegant dress for their dinner outing. Her nervous energy had transformed slightly, no longer purely anxious, but tinged with genuine excitement for the evening ahead. Daniel picked her up promptly, complimenting her appearance with a warmth that made her blush slightly, before driving them toward the small restaurant he had mentioned earlier. The restaurant itself was cozy and intimate, filled with the comforting aroma of spices and fresh bread, soft lighting casting a warm glow over the scattered tables. Their dinner conversation continued the easy, comfortable flow they had established during their coffee meeting, filled with laughter, genuine curiosity, and the gradual unveiling of small, personal details neither had shared with anyone in quite some time. As the evening progressed, Mia found herself feeling more comfortable around Daniel than she had felt around anyone in years, the initial awkwardness of their first meeting long forgotten, replaced instead by genuine connection and growing affection. By the time Daniel walked her back to her apartment door at the end of the evening, neither of them wanted the night to end, lingering near the entrance in comfortable silence, both aware of the growing significance of whatever this connection between them had become. "Thank you for tonight," Mia said softly, glancing up at him with genuine appreciation. "Thank you for saying yes," Daniel replied, his voice equally soft, filled with a warmth that made her heart flutter gently. They stood there for a moment longer, neither quite ready to say goodnight, before Daniel finally leaned forward slightly, offering a gentle, respectful hug that lingered just a moment longer than a simple farewell. "Good night, Mia," he said finally, stepping back with a warm smile. "Good night, Daniel," she replied, watching as he walked back toward his car before finally stepping inside her apartment, her heart still fluttering from the warmth of the evening they had shared. As she prepared for bed that night, Mia couldn't help but marvel at how quickly things had changed since that mortifying moment in the hallway weeks earlier. What had started as her worst nightmare had somehow transformed into one of the most meaningful connections she had experienced in years, and she found herself looking forward, with genuine excitement, to whatever might come next. Weeks passed quickly after their first dinner together, each day bringing new moments of connection between Mia and Daniel, small text messages exchanged throughout busy workdays, weekend outings that grew increasingly comfortable and familiar. What had started as an embarrassing accident had grown into something neither of them had expected, yet both had come to cherish deeply. Daniel's planned few weeks in town stretched longer than either of them anticipated, his work occasionally allowing remote flexibility that let him extend his stay without immediate concern. Mia noticed the change in herself during this time, a growing confidence that had slowly replaced her usual hesitance, a willingness to step outside her comfortable routine that she hadn't experienced in years. They spent weekends exploring small local markets together, Daniel patiently browsing through antique shops with her, in search of new postcards to add to her growing collection, genuinely interested in each new addition, rather than merely tolerating her hobby. Mia, in turn, found herself asking more questions about his travels, secretly hoping that one day she might accompany him to some of the places he described so vividly. One afternoon, while browsing through a particularly cluttered antique shop, Daniel called her over excitedly, holding up a faded postcard with a small, satisfied smile. "Look what I found," he said, handing it to her carefully. Mia's eyes widened slightly as she recognized the image. a small coastal town remarkably similar to the one she had mentioned during their very first conversation weeks earlier. "This looks just like the one I told you about," she said softly, turning the postcard over in her hands with genuine wonder. "I remembered," Daniel said simply, watching her reaction with quiet satisfaction. "Thought you might like it." Mia looked up at him, touched by the thoughtful gesture, surprised by how much such a small detail meant to her. "Thank you," she said softly. "This means more than you probably realize." Daniel smiled warmly, seemingly pleased by her genuine appreciation. "I'm glad you like it." As the weeks continued, their relationship deepened naturally, without pressure or forced expectation, simply growing organically from the foundation they had built during those first mortifying, yet unexpectedly meaningful moments together. Grace watched the progression with obvious delight, teasing them both relentlessly whenever the opportunity arose, though her teasing carried genuine happiness for her closest friend, and her brother finding such an unexpected connection together. One evening, as they sat together in Mia's small apartment, sharing a quiet dinner she had prepared herself, Daniel brought up the topic neither of them had directly addressed yet, though both had clearly been considering it. "I have to head back for work soon," he said gently, watching her reaction carefully. "My time off is coming to an end." Mia felt a small pang of sadness at the reminder, though she had known this moment would eventually arrive. "I figured as much," she said softly. "When do you leave?" "Next week," Daniel replied, his tone carrying a hint of reluctance that mirrored her own feelings. "Though this time, it won't mean losing touch entirely." Mia looked up at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking," Daniel continued, his expression thoughtful. "My work does require travel, but it's not constant. I have breaks between assignments, opportunities to return home more regularly than I used to, and with video calls and messages, distance doesn't have to mean losing connection." "You've really thought this through," Mia said, touched by his consideration. "I don't want what we've built these past few weeks to fade just because of distance," Daniel said earnestly, reaching across the table to take her hand gently. "You've become someone genuinely important to me, Mia. I'd like to see where this goes, even with the challenges my work might bring." Mia's heart swelled at his words, genuine happiness mixing with the earlier sadness of his upcoming departure. "I'd like that too," she said softly, squeezing his hand gently. "You've become important to me as well, Daniel, more than I expected when we first met." They shared a comfortable, meaningful silence, both aware of the significance of this conversation, both committing silently to making this unexpected connection work, despite the challenges ahead. The following week passed quickly, filled with bittersweet moments as Daniel prepared for his departure, each day carrying both the happiness of their continued time together and the growing awareness of his impending absence. Mia found herself cherishing every small moment, every shared laugh, every quiet conversation, more deeply aware of their significance now that time felt limited. On the day of his departure, Mia insisted on driving him to the airport, despite Daniel's initial protests that it wasn't necessary. They stood together near the security checkpoint, neither quite ready to say goodbye, the weight of the moment settling heavily between them. "This isn't goodbye," Daniel said softly, cupping her face gently in his hands. "Just a temporary distance, I promise." "I know," Mia said, her voice slightly unsteady with emotion. "I'll miss you, though." "I'll miss you too," Daniel replied, his own voice carrying genuine emotion. "But we'll figure this out together. I'll call you tonight, once I land." Mia nodded, forcing a small smile despite the sadness building in her chest. "I'll be waiting." Daniel leaned forward, pressing a gentle, lingering kiss to her forehead, before pulling back with a warm, reassuring smile. "This is just the beginning, Mia, not the end." She nodded again, watching as he gathered his bags and made his way through security, glancing back one final time before disappearing from view. Mia stood there for a long moment, her heart heavy yet strangely hopeful, before finally turning to make her way back to her car. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Mia's life, one filled with video calls during quiet evenings, playful messages throughout busy workdays, and the occasional voice message left simply because Daniel wanted to hear her laugh, even from thousands of miles away. Despite the distance, their connection remained strong, growing deeper through consistent effort and genuine care from both sides. Grace remained a constant source of support during this time, listening patiently whenever Mia missed Daniel more than usual, offering reassurance and gentle teasing in equal measure. Mia found comfort in these conversations, grateful for the friendship that had ultimately led her to this unexpected, meaningful relationship in the first place. Months later, Daniel returned home for an extended visit, and this time, their reunion felt different, more certain, more secure, in the knowledge that their connection could withstand distance and time apart. Mia met him at the airport this time, unable to contain her excitement as she spotted him walking through the arrival gates, dropping his bags the moment he saw her, to pull her into a warm, tight embrace. "I missed you so much," Mia whispered against his shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. "I missed you more," Daniel replied softly, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the airport noise fading into insignificance around them. When they finally pulled back, Daniel studied her face with a warm, affectionate expression. "I have something to ask you," he said, his tone suddenly nervous, despite his usual confidence. Mia's heart skipped slightly at his change in demeanor. "What is it?" Daniel reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, worn postcard, the same coastal town from Portugal that had started as nothing more than a distant dream in one of her collections. "I got us tickets," he said softly, handing her the postcard along with a folded piece of paper tucked behind it. "For next month, I thought it was time you actually saw this place, rather than just imagining it." Mia's eyes filled with tears as she unfolded the paper, revealing 2 plane tickets to the exact coastal town pictured on the postcard she had cherished for years. "Daniel," she whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture, "this is incredible. I wanted to give you the chance to experience the places you've only imagined," Daniel said gently, watching her reaction with genuine affection, "and I wanted to be the one to share that moment with you." Mia looked up at him, her heart overflowing with genuine happiness and love, grateful beyond words for the unexpected journey that had brought them together. What had started as the most mortifying accident of her life had transformed into the most meaningful relationship she had ever experienced, one built on genuine connection, mutual understanding, and shared dreams that neither of them had anticipated finding in each other. As they walked out of the airport together, hand in hand, Mia couldn't help but reflect on the strange, unpredictable nature of life, how the smallest, most embarrassing mistakes could sometimes lead to the greatest, most unexpected blessings. She had walked through the wrong door that night, expecting nothing more than a humiliating memory to forget as quickly as possible. Instead, she had found Daniel, and with him, a future she had never dared to imagine, one filled with genuine love, shared adventures, and the comforting knowledge that sometimes the best things in life arrive when we least expect them, wrapped in circumstances we never could have predicted. Their story, born from an accidental encounter in a hallway, had become something neither of them would trade for anything in the world, a reminder that even our most embarrassing moments can lead us toward the connections that matter most.